Hello, it's Pastor Jeremy Ulrich here again with the Daily Bread Bible Study, and we are looking at Tuesday, February 11th, 2020. That is day 42 for Numbers 8 through 10. So we are carrying on and learning a little bit more, some more details about what was talked about in Exodus, and we'll see some references to look back to as we're discussing more about the temple of God. So we see that we are in the tabernacle and we are interacting with the lampstand. And so they're giving instructions on how to build the lampstand, how to make it shine with the gold that will be around it. And it says in Numbers 8:2, "Speak to Aaron and say to him, when you set up the lamps, the 7 lamps shall give light in front of the lampstand," which I think means on top of the lampstand. So the 7 candles on top of this lampstand there in the tabernacle may seem strange to anybody who has participated in Hanukkah, because often in Hanukkah we see the 9 candles represented there for the observance of Hanukkah. And so what is the difference here? Well, I think the difference is that the menorah, from what I've been reading online, I should say, is that the menorah, the 7-candle version, is to be used exclusively in the tabernacle of the Lord. And so a 9-candle version is used in the observance of Hanukkah as to show reverence to the tabernacle and sanctuary of the Lord. So I found that pretty interesting piece of information. Moving on to the consecration and the service of the Levites, we see that there is, again, the laying on hands is observed. And this laying on of hands is it's not defined exactly what the laying on of hands does. But my guess is that it's connected with blessing and responsibility and dedicating things to God specifically. So you have the people come and they lay their hands on one another. So here we see that the Israelites shall lay their hands on the Levites, as it says in Numbers 8:10. All of the group comes and lay on their hands on the Levites, who are set apart for a godly purpose on behalf of the people, on behalf of God redeeming all of the firstborn of Israel during the Passover. And so then we see that the Levites in turn lay their hands on the heads of the bulls who will be sacrificed during their consecration. So this is my best comparison is the way that we think about passing on something through touch, especially as children play a game called tag. So you run up and you tag somebody and you say, "You're it." And then somehow they transition in a role from being a follower to being the tagger, the one who goes and tries to pass the tag and pass it to somebody else. So it's an interesting connection here between taking that sense of it and putting it on the Levites, and then the Levites putting it on the bulls, which they will go ahead and offer up as a sacrifice set apart to God for that. Along with the Levites, we learn that there's a proper age for those who serve in the tabernacle, and that age is 25 years old to 50 years old. So after 50, you will be retired as a Levite in your service to the Lord in the tabernacle in that way, and you would retire out. Looking at chapter 9, we see more exposition and discussion on the Passover, adding to what we already discussed in detail on day 19, which was January 19th, when we looked at Exodus chapters 11 through 13. And we see this discussion of the Passover become a pastoral concern. So the pastoral concern is this in Numbers 9:7. "Although we are unclean through touching a corpse, why must we be kept from presenting the Lord's offering at its appointed time among the Israelites for the Passover. And so they want to be a part of the community even though they are ritually unclean. So Moses goes and consults God. And the decree that follows is that those who are ritually unclean should still observe the Passover. And in addition to that, it's an observance for all of those who are living in the community, even the resident aliens. Anybody who wants to participate in this Passover service will be accepted in this community, but must follow it according to the rules and rituals stipulated for the Passover. So the Passover must be kept sacred and holy, but it's also an opportunity to invite others to be a part of this service. So just reflecting upon this as Christians, we often talk about, here in the ELCA, we talk about open communion and the idea that those who are not a part of the community, maybe outsiders, can be able to take the gifts of God that God has set apart, this gift that helps define who we are as a people of God through this unique experience called the Last Supper or Holy Communion, and as we observe on Sundays. So, I find that interesting that there is a opportunity for other people to observe this most holy observance that they have there. So we see, moving on in chapter 9, that it talks a little bit about the cloud and the fire, which is similar to, again, Exodus chapter 33. That's on day 25 there in our Bible study. And we are looking at how do we observe this following of the cloud. And it says in Numbers 9:22, whether it was 2 days or a month or a long time that the cloud continued over the tabernacle, resting upon it, the Israelites would remain in camp and would not set out. But when it lifted, they would set out, because they followed the presence of the Lord being physically there on the tabernacle. Chapter 10 moves on and talks a little bit more in detail about the silver trumpets, the things that I had not heard too much about, but we talked a little bit about that in Exodus chapter 19, because the trumpet called from Mount Sinai for the congregations to gather. In Leviticus 23, we read about the Festival of Trumpets, but not really much mentioned there. In Leviticus 25, there was sounds mentioned of the trumpets being blown as a sound in connection with the year of Jubilee. And so again, we hear in Numbers chapter 10, verse 2, make 2 silver trumpets. You shall make them of hammered work, and you shall use them for summoning the congregation and for breaking of camp. The sons of Aaron would be in charge of the trumpets, and the purposes would be for general alarms within the camp, festivals, the gathering of people together, and especially the gathering of people together in order to break camp and move. And so kind of an announcement system I am getting, and gathering system. We learn in chapter 10 that they finally depart from Mount Sinai in the second year, the second month, on the 20th day, the cloud lifted. And so they go and follow in order the presence of the Lord. So they start by breaking camp, with the East Camp going first. So we had a contributor on the Daily Bread GroupMe page give some good feedback on the order of it. And so I looked back into the Genesis story about the birth order of the sons of Jacob. And so we see that the East Camp is led by Judah, with Issachar and Zebulun, those tribes, which are Leah's sons 4, 5, and 6, born from Leah directly there. And then between that East Camp, we have the Gershonites and the Merarites of the Levitical order. Then, those are the ones with they've got the wagons and the oxen, so they're the ones in charge of getting the tent poles and then also the tabernacle cloth, the tent as well of the tabernacle. So they take all of those objects. Then the south camp goes with Reuben, Simeon, and Gad, which are Leah's other sons. Her son's firstborn Reuben, then Simeon, the secondborn, and then the son given by Zilpah to Jacob, which was Leah's handmaid. Then we see the Kohathites coming after the south camp, the last Levitical priests, but they are carrying everything on their shoulders, so they have no oxen or wagons carrying what they have directly in the middle of this camp. We see the west camp, the Ephraim, Manasseh, and Benjamin, which are the youngest in the line of Rachel. Ephraim and Manasseh being Joseph's two sons, and they got a equal share of as their tribes because of the double portion that Joseph received. And then we have really the group that I'd call the rest. We've got the north camp with Dan, Asher, and Naphtali. So a little bit of Leah and Rachel there. We see Numbers 10:35 talk a little bit more and says, whenever the ark sets out, Moses would say, "Arise, O Lord, let your enemies be scattered and your foes flee before us." And whenever they came to rest, he would say, "Return, O Lord, of the 10,000 thousands of Israel." So just these little sayings as they were there setting up and going out, and whenever they would pick up and hoping that God would bless them as they are moving towards the promised land, that those individuals would flee before them, that they would not have to fight. But we know that looking down later in the line, they will in fact have some skirmishes with the people of the land in order to receive the promised land. But that's for another day. So thank you again for joining me for the Daily Bread Bible Study. We look forward to the next time for day 43.